Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to jump in to episode 2 and discuss with you primarily, this one will be a little bit shorter, but the ultimate discussion today is Mr. Kessinger and his role that he played in the interview process with Nicole and law enforcement. Now, in this video clip, you're going to see and hear from a public website, Mr. Kessinger speaking with his staff, and they are working on a large project together. It was a very important project that they had going, and he ended up ultimately being very successful with it. But what I want you to pay attention to when you're listening to this is I want you to pay attention to the tone of his voice, the cadence, the matter-of-factness, directness, his assertiveness. Just, it's my opinion that he comes across as very much like business as usual. He's in his element. This is his career. This is literally him being innovative, a leader, and pouring his heart into this project at work. And then I want you to compare what you see and hear in this video, and you compare that to the law enforcement video where Nicole Kessinger is being interviewed and her father is present. Now, originally, I had all kinds of feelings, mixed emotions over why in the world was her father even present and all of the things. And I seem to have a better grasp on why her father may have been there, because I know that all it would take from one of my children, I don't care how old they are, is to make one phone call and I will be there for them. And I can straight up tell you, no matter what, I would tell them, you don't say another word. And then you get out of there, you go get an attorney, and then you figure everything out. I mean, there's a reason why you don't talk. And the fact that she can't even come out of hiding right now because of some of the stuff she said, that's kind of case in point. Because if she's 100% innocent and did nothing wrong other than mess around with a married man, then she's really just talked herself into seclusion. And that's no way to live. So, not to mention guilt by the media and everything else.
Flow and pressure would actually be what we need. We don't want to inhibit the pump, but we don't want to backflow fresh air back into the O2 line. So that's this section right here. Okay. So once we have this pressurized right here, what we're doing is a solenoid, and what the PLC is going to do is actually cycle it through. So if we have a dozen patients, there's going to be 4 on each manifold. So what we want to do, So what we want to do is if we pulse these guys on, we don't want to take all of our pressure.
Like a safe house in Denver that I can go to, that I have the keys to, that has nobody there ever, and it's all I have to do is check the mail, and there's no questions asked, and nobody knows where it is, and I'm not telling anybody, but it's like a really nice spot for me to like hide out, and I don't have any friends in that building. I mean, it's an apartment, but it's
and we will answer your phone calls, but the safe house is from
the safe house is the safe house. Like a safe house in Denver that I can go to.
My takeaway from this was Dwayne Kessinger did not just show up with his daughter thinking, my poor pitiful little girl, I can't believe she's had her heart broken, and how in the world could she have gotten caught up with this man? That's not him. He's not over there licking his wounds, panicking. We see him console her, but then even that short-lived, because, well, it's it's very visible. You can see it. She cries for about 2 seconds, and then she dries it up extremely quickly. And then it's just on to the next question. Now, whether she's just distancing or disassociating herself with it in that moment, that's that's another video. But when it comes to her father, it's my opinion that when we watch this video and you listen to the audio, that what you hear when Dwayne Kessinger is at work and it's business as usual is the same exact tone, dialogue, same approach is what he uses in this interview with Kessinger. And the reason I bring up that I don't think he's worried about his daughter and whether or not, her feelings are getting hurt or anything like that, I genuinely believe for him, it was like, great, here we go again. Like, can you not have morals? Can you not make sound decisions without it landing us in some way, shape, or form being humiliated with law enforcement? Thinking, I thought you were on the right track. You finally landed the job that you wanted. Basically, how did we get here? How did you get here this time? And so, business as usual, when it lands you in the police department, it's not really business that your father can be proud of. And so I don't believe that for a second Dwayne Kessinger sat in that interview thinking, my poor pitiful daughter. I think he very much sounded, in that interview, he seemed to really disassociate himself from his own daughter, because he knew that every word she said, everything brought up, questioned, left up in the air, he knew that it was going to come back, or it had the potential to come back and really land her in a pretty miserable situation.
Was not pregnant, and forgive me, but if he takes her out of the picture, you're never going to know that she was pregnant, right?
What do you mean takes her out of the picture? Like,
if he murdered her, she's out of the picture. You're never going to know if she was pregnant. If he can get away with murder, you're not going to. I got divorced from my wife. You say, do you understand what I'm saying here? If she's gone,
but this
don't lead.
Hypothetically,
please.
Yeah.
Don't
Hypothetically,
lead on.
if she,
okay.
You understand where I'm going. If
right,
you didn't know,
you're leading into
right.
questions that are nothing with your.
If you didn't know, though.
Wait, Nick.
That she was there.
Did you hear what I said?
I'm following you. I just want her to answer a question that relates to. She said something that's important. That if he didn't have a child on the way, or if she didn't know that, she would have continued the relationship, right?
But he killed his kids. At what point does he think that I'm going to be in a relationship?
I'm not talking about the children. I'm just talking specifically about her. If you only knew, if the kids were still here, and he called you and said, "I'm divorced from my wife," and
we really hear it in his tone of voice, and it comes through, especially when he looks at her and he says, "Nick, wait." Nikki, or he says, he tells the detective, don't lead, and then he tells Nicole to wait. And then you can see it in her body language. She doesn't even say a word, but her dad is just straight on her. And he says, "Did you hear me?" I said, "Wait." And keep in mind, she's 30 years old. She's not 14. She's a grown woman. She's 30 years old. She's perfectly capable of making her own decisions. And yet her father in that moment is just extremely direct with her and lets her know very quickly, you may have thought you knew what you were doing. You may have thought you knew what you were getting into, but now you need to just sit there and shut up, because the only way you're walking out of here is if you listen. And So my perspective and perception of Mr. Kessinger has changed through the years, and it's something I haven't really spoken out about very much. But do I believe she's a daddy's girl? I do. I believe that it's like she said, she knows that no matter what, she can call her dad, and she's going to be safe. And do I believe that her dad is that protector for her? I do. I believe that she does have a good relationship with him. But boy, I'm telling you what, I don't think their conversation together when they left that police department, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall with that one, because I don't believe that it was coddling her. I think he probably drilled it into her pretty firmly what was about to happen with her. And so I would love to hear your comments on it, what you think. What do you think about his tone and his directness with her? What were your thoughts about his responses to her when she appeared to be crying or upset? And how, as a parent, do you think you would have handled it differently? And I ask that very cautiously, because please, 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 in the comments, please use, in my opinion, because, or I believe I would have handled it X, Y, and Z. We don't need you to tell people that they're stupid or their thoughts are different, just because their thoughts are different. And I do urge you to take a minute before commenting and really put yourself in Mr. Kessinger's shoes. Your children are grown. You're off, on the next season of your life and your career. It's thriving. You're doing well for yourself. He was remarried or is remarried, and, life is good. And then all of a sudden you get a phone call from your daughter who says, the guy I've been seeing, daddy's married and he has kids, and now the kids and his wife are missing and we don't know where they are. And just imagine the phone call he gets. And it's like, I have to go talk to the detectives again. So he's already thinking, holy crap, she's already been in there once. Now she's going back. And then he goes in and he sits in this interview. And we've discussed it a little bit in the comments and whatnot, but it appears that they had already had a conversation outside before they even started recording, which leads to a lot of speculation as to what was it that they spoke about. It could be something just as simple as, this is the direction that the interview is going to go. These are some of the things I'm going to ask you about, and just know that I have to ask these questions. It could be something as simple as that. It could have been as extensive as immunity and or what her involvement was and what that would look like for her. And there, again, you would have to look further into the immunity clauses and the different types of immunity. And I think that would be of interest to you, especially in this case. But you have to just keep in mind, he's getting a phone call or a text message that says, hey, Dad, we need to talk, in person. I'm in trouble. Can you get here? And as a parent, you show up to the police department. What do? How do you react? So I think it's really, really important to think about those things, because I've posed the question. I don't want to get off too much on Chris here, because this video is not about him, but I've mentioned it numerous times about Ronnie and Chris, and how Ronnie goes in and he's talking to them, and he looks at his son and he's like, is there anything else you want to tell me? I'm sitting there screaming at the TV, shut up, both of you, shut up. you have to know that and they even told him, you're being recorded, your own video, we've got the audio, we're going to leave it in there on the table. Like, who does that? And please understand, I know and I get where everyone comes in when it's like, oh, well, you know, the kids were still missing and Shanann was missing. At that time, law enforcement was already out at Survey. By the time they brought the image to Chris, they'd already found Shanann, and they had a pretty good idea where the girls were. They just needed him to confirm it. It's the burden of the state to prove their case. And I believe he is exactly where he needs to be. I just simply believe that a trial would have been the better way to go about it. And I'm getting a little off track or off topic, but dialing it back down to Ronnie's decision to walk in there and not tell his son to just stop. Just be quiet. Don't say another word. Mom and I are going to get an attorney and we will have a discussion outside of the police station. They're not arresting you right now. Just stop. Or even if they do arrest you, shut up. Don't say anything else. And get the representation that he needs and then figure it out from there. By the time they were holding him in there and basically getting ready to arrest him, I mean, again, everyone was starting to be found. If Shanann was found, then chances were the kids were going to be found too. But we also have the argument that comes up, or people mention that, well, Ronnie didn't say or tell him to stop or anything like that because Ronnie wasn't familiar with the law. And I have to say, I don't know that I buy that at all, because frankly, you don't develop a cocaine habit. And this is allegedly according to Chris. His father allegedly developed a cocaine habit when he went off to college. You don't develop that from people get wrapped up in that world and not know your rights, not know how to keep yourself out of trouble if you got caught. And so I don't believe for a minute that Ronnie walked in there and didn't know or understand that it was better for his son to just be quiet than it was to sit there and eventually come out and tell him whatever he told him. Even when Chris said, I don't want to protect her, right then I would have been like, shut up. Not another word. Because if he's not wanting to protect somebody, if he's not wanting, like he says she wasn't supposed to be there. Okay, well, I'm already in my head going, who the hell are you talking about? Your wife's supposed to be at the house. Who's not supposed to be there? And, hindsight is 20/20. Everyone can Monday morning quarterback this thing all day long. But simply put, Dwayne Kessinger went in there, business as usual. And I'm not saying like law enforcement corruption type of business. I'm saying he's a businessman. He's an engineer, a scientist, very matter-of-factly, direct, goes in, handles the business because, quite frankly, I believe he was already fed up with Nicole, especially landing in this big of hot water. And then on the flip side of that, you have Ronnie Watts walking in and basically encouraging his son to confess, whether falsely or truthfully. That's still yet to be determined. And you can swing that however you want to as well. But at the end of the day, I used to think that it was odd and peculiar for Dwayne Kessinger to have attended that interview with his daughter. However, I see it now through just a different lens of, as a parent, there are things that our kids do that we do not agree with, that we would never support, we would never back them on. But just because they make stupid decisions or horrible decisions, you don't love them any less. Like, you still love your kids. And I've dealt with this in the comment sections before, where people are like, how could Cindy still love him? I could never love him if my kid ever, did this to my grandchildren and daughter-in-law. There's no way I'd be able to love him. And that's sad. That's very sad to me. One, because we don't know the whole story. We don't. We have the lies and craziness that Chris has said. We've got the Facebook posts and things that that we were able to witness and see through Shanann's Facebook. However, if you even remotely think for a second that Facebook tells you everything there is to know about a person or a marriage, then you're seriously, seriously mistaken. In my opinion, no one can really just sit back and say, oh, if my kid did that, I would never love them anymore. I wouldn't want anything else to do with them. Or her. I wouldn't want anything. I would never support her if she did X, Y, and Z. I would never not even support. I wouldn't love her anymore if she did X, Y, and Z. Or he did. And that is so sad to me, because all that tells me is that the majority of the people saying that have never felt that unconditional love from their own parents. And what a sad place to be in. Because I can tell you this. I can tell it from the granddaughter's perspective. I can tell you from the daughter's perspective. And I now can tell you from a mother's perspective. In the sense of, I watched my grandmother grieve and hurt and mourn the life and the loss of her son. My father was her only son. It was her oldest child. And he just chose the wrong dang path. And it was over and over. And it was drugs. And then it turned into violence because, drug-related deals and things like that. And it went from one extreme to the other. And then, you get locked up the first time for a year. You come out, you're on probation, you break it, you go right back in, you serve the full sentence. You come out, you do something worse, you go back. And by the time he was 8, 9, 10 years in, he would get out, and then he would just go right back in for the same stupid crap. I watched my grandmother, and to this day, now at almost 40 years old, I still hear the clanking of the bars behind me from where my grandparents used to take me to the prison to see my father when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, hoping that he would realize that he had a daughter and would get out and want to do better. I mean, I went through pat downs. We sat at the little tables where you could only hug at the end of your visit, and we would always take a picture. And I did find some of these, and I thought I would just share them with you. And because I want you to understand, when I'm talking about a lot of these topics, the amount of stuff I've lived through, witnessed, and there's just such a depth there, and a understanding of empathy and sympathy for what everyone in this case especially has dealt with. And is it all the same? No, it's not. But you know what? My grandmother losing her son to the prison system has been a lifelong thing for her. To this day, I asked her, I said, Grandmama, if I do an interview with you, will you share with me like how you felt through the years and dealing with my biological father being incarcerated the majority of my life. And I mean, she just immediately, tears comes to her eyes, and she's blocked it out so much. Like, in her mind, she has a son and he is just away. She doesn't even know where he is half the time. I can't imagine that as a parent. But I've watched this woman, and she's now in her 80s, and I've watched her just, she has loved and prayed so hard for her son to turn his life around. And he did the same thing, got in prison, and then he turned to God, and suddenly he got saved. And my aunt and uncle at the time they were heavy in the church. And so when he got out, it was like, okay, here's a job, here's a place to stay, here's a place to get on your feet. And what do you do after about 3 weeks? He tosses it to the side and he goes right back. Well, that's a living, breathing, current situation of a mother loving her son who has done some horrible things that he's been incarcerated for. She doesn't approve of any of it. It disgusts her and it sickens her, but at the end of the day, that's still her kid. And then we look at Cindy defending her kid, Chris, and everyone's just up in arms, like, I can't believe the audacity of this woman. Well, we don't know the other side to that marriage. We don't. There's some things that Shanann's first husband corroborates with Chris on how she acted. There's things that we see in videos, and there's things that we've seen in posts and things of that nature that line up with some not too pretty images of being portrayed, if you will. Does that mean that we have the full story? No, we don't. And so just as much as the Ruseks have every right to want to defend Shanann, Chris's family has every right to want to defend theirs. Just as my grandmother, bless her heart, who can't stand anything, and it weighs so heavy on her what her son has done and made of his life. It hurts her so deeply, but she still loves her kid. And that goes all the way back around to Kessinger and her father sitting in there at that table with the detective, literally probably running the conversations he and Nicole had prior to this meeting. Just trying to say, what in the world did you tell them in the first interview? How detailed did you go? What did you offer them? What have you given them? I mean, I'm sure a man of his stature was drilling her with questions, trying to get a gauge for what are we about to walk into. And that's why, in my opinion, that interview seems very directed and controlled by her father. And I no longer believe that he was there trying to corrupt or manipulate anything. I think he was told a story. He was told a portion or a version of the story. He went in there as any father would do, and he made sure his daughter did not slip up and say something stupid. Because there were a few times when she would be asked a question and it should have just been a yes or no answer. One of the biggest ones that comes to mind, and you'd have to go back in the video and watch it. I'll try to find the timestamp for you. But you have to watch it when the detective asks her, well, you've only been to the house twice, so how did you access the house when you were there? It should have been a quick once through the garage, once through the front door, and it wasn't. She went all around that question and finally kind of came to some answers. But if you watch her father, he doesn't move his body. He doesn't say anything. He shifts his eyes at her. And it is that parental stare of, don't you dare say another word. Like, I don't know where you're going with this, but you need to stop. If you've ever been a parent, and especially with teenagers or a toddler, and you do that whole talk through your teeth thing, my kids know it all too well. If I have to say, stop it, instead of just please stop, we've reached a whole different level. And in that interview, I firmly believe that's what we see with his eyes. He will dart those eyes back over to her. And when she doesn't pick up on it, he shifts in his chair. And he does it ever so slightly to get her attention. And then you see her either A, she changes up the story, she changes up her answer, or she just stops. I am going to wrap this episode up. It is short, I know, but I wanted to at least get something together. This was a points that could have been taken into a much more extensive video. However, I really wanted to keep some of these episodes short. That first one took so much longer than what I anticipated it taking, and I greatly appreciate you guys and your patience with that. And so I figured, why not? Let's go ahead and get a little mini episode out. And because I felt very strongly about Mr. Kessinger's presence, especially that we did the live, and with it being the primary focus in that first episode, I wanted to just do a follow-up from the perspective of her father, and where and how I thought he viewed and why he chose to approach that interview in the manner that he did. Again, I really don't believe he walked in there thinking, my poor sweet little girl. I really believe he walked in there going, really? Really? Like, get in there, let's answer these questions, and let's get the hell out of here before you get us into some trouble. Like, I really would like to know what that conversation between her and her father was afterwards. Because, yeah, she was sick and not feeling well, and he mentions that a little bit. And he checks on her, but it's all about her safety and protection. Is she sick and not feeling well? Okay, how do we make that better? Work. What's her work reputation going to be? How's he going to navigate around that? The media. Again, it's just very direct. It's almost bullet pointed, where it's like, the plea deal, what does it mean? The situations, that's before I go. That's something that I will be discussing in the future, and that will be, what does he mean by the situations? So that very well may be episode 3, if not 4. However, for the sake of this one, I really would like to hear what your thoughts are, because I believe he went in there very bullet pointed, saying, these are the topics we're going to go over. I need to figure out what the plan is, how we're going to get through this, what's the next step. And by the way, Nikki, sit over there and shut up, because I'm trying to figure out how to walk back out this door without you catching a charge for something that you didn't do. Because I don't believe for a second that, I don't know, I don't want to speculate that much. I think that's too much speculation. I'd love to know whether or not he actually believed whether or not she had anything to do with it. I would be interested in his honest opinion on that. But I think that's going to do it for this one, guys. I appreciate you so much. And please don't forget to like and share. Hit the subscribe button if you have not. And, until next time, guys. Talk soon.